Happy Monday, family. So grateful to be recording this episode. Welcome to the 365 Dad podcast. This is the launch. This is it. This is the official launch of the 365 Dad podcast. I'm your host, Odini, father of two, entrepreneur, one-on-one coach, and just overall cool guy. Like, come on. Seriously, man, I'm just so grateful to be launching this podcast. This podcast will definitely be a space for dads, especially the millennial dads who are kind of stuck in between that phase of should I be looking into my inner self? But my dad is telling me that is kind of lame, right? This is who we are, right? We're in that midst of we're parenting like our parents, but we have so much resource out there to help us realize that, hey, maybe this isn't the way it should be done. And I'm proud of you for taking this step and listening to this podcast and trying to figure it all out. This podcast is going to be just your safe space. We are going to use the foundation is going to be mindfulness and journaling, self reflection, spirituality. And we're going to use those foundations to basically look into how we gain emotional clarity as men. And we're going to look into how we gain emotional clarity in our roles as dad. Also, how do we intentionally communicate with our family, our kids? And I think what's often overlooked in all of this is how do we go about building community and finding community for like-minded dads. So that's what you're going to get from this podcast. You're just going to get a bunch of talk showing you and helping you and guiding you on how to not show up as just your best self as dad, but also show up as your best self as a man, as an individual in this world. Yeah, so a little update, for me, what I got going on right now. I have the coaching program up and running. The 365 Dad Journal is out, so I'll leave all that information in the show notes. So make sure you check out the 365 Dad Journal. 365 prompts uniquely created by me, just all of my experiences, to help us on this journey. So without further delay, we're going to get into today's episode, today's topic. So today's topic is Dear Dad, you know, being vulnerable is a superpower. So this is something that I've been talking about with some of my friends for years now. But I put this on threads recently and I put, hey dads, read this. Being vulnerable is a superpower. And it kind of like got the people going. Like some people responded to the threads and they were like, while I see what you're trying to do here, I disagree. Right. So, some people definitely agreed and they're like, yeah, being vulnerable is definitely as a man, as a dad, is a good look. But some actually disagreed. And one person disagreed and said that he views being vulnerable to our children is a sign of showing weakness. And we should mainly be vulnerable to those who we can actually like, those who can help us fix the situation. Like I guess other dads, family members, and so forth. And that's where I disagree, right? So, mind you, the way my spiritual practice is, I actually have a real good knack on intuition to know that everything is equally good and bad, right? Nothing is just good and nothing is just bad. So I'm actually grateful to have that view. Because I have that view, I'm able to kind of really appreciate everyone's perspective, right? So I'm sure being a vulnerable dad does have its downside. But my job here today is to open your eyes to the upside of being vulnerable and just how much of a profound impact that can have on not just your life, it can have on your children's life, it can have on their children's life, their partners when they start dating, like all, like just being vulnerable as a man is in today's society has so much upside. So it's my job to just kind of show you that upside, and hopefully you take nuggets from it and apply it into your daily life. So with that being said, do I think being vulnerable is a sign of weakness? Absolutely not. Um, my son is 12 years old, and when I tell you, this man knows literally like everything that I go through. And, initially it was tough for me to bring him to this point because I used to I saw something on the internet one day and it was like, oh, don't let your kids see you without your cape on, dad. If you're a dad, don't let your kids see you without your cape on. And I really like looked into that, and I'm just like, I used to be that way, right? Like I could have the worst day in the world. I could be feeling like all the stress the world can put on my shoulders as a man in this society. And I would be around my kid and mask it, right? I'm gonna get to why that's a problem. So I would do that, and I would kind of just mask everything. And it got to a point where, I think he was around 8 years old or so. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tell this little boy everything, right? And the reason why I do that is because I want him to see me go through adversity, right? I want him to see that. I think that's a good example. I also want him to feel like this is a honest and trusting relationship between us two, right? I want him to look at his dad as someone that doesn't hide things, right? I want him to feel like he can talk to me because when it's his turn to be vulnerable, I want him to be able to do that with me. So there's a ton of reasons why being vulnerable is great when it comes to the bond that you're going to build with your child. And I'm going to talk about the benefits of being vulnerable with our daughters too, if you're raising a girl. But right now, when it comes to raising a boy, a young man, and being vulnerable, I mean, we live in this society where, they're going to be told not to be vulnerable. So they're going to be told to try to handle everything on their own. They're going to be told not to seek help. And we all, most of us coming up, we're told that. And that's a problem because what we're going to do, and I'm sure you all have this experience, is uh, you're going to get into relationships and you're going to shut your partner out, right? You're going to like, as men, we do this. We like, I've lost relationships as I was coming up because I wasn't doing this work and I was afraid to be vulnerable. And instead of like bringing someone into what I had going on and, potentially having them help me, I kind of shut down and try to handle it on my own. And that usually never works out for us, right? So, it's important for us to be vulnerable with our children, especially when we're raising boys, because we want them to see that it's important to be okay with asking for help, right? It's okay to be honest. It's okay to show your raw emotions. That is not a sign of weakness. That is actually a sign of inner strength. So I just wanted to get that out the way. While I can see why someone who is raised in this society will, default to thinking being vulnerable is being weak, I just want you to know that it's not. I want you to know that being vulnerable is actually being strong because you're facing your fears, right? Think about that. You're facing your fears if you're being vulnerable as a man today. So you should continue to do that. Now, when it comes to the importance of being vulnerable with our children when we're raising young women, I mean, where do I start? The impact of the relationships that our daughters have with us, like it goes so deep. And I'm sure you all know about daddy wounds and all of these things, but like it gets deep. You don't want your daughter attracting men or purposely looking for men that will not open up to them. And that's what's going to happen the more and more that we are afraid to be vulnerable with our children, right? You don't want them to think that, oh, the only guy in my life that I can get is going to be a guy that shuts me out when he's going through something. Is going to be a guy that emotionally taps out, a guy that emotionally just shuts down. You don't want to do that because they're going to attract a guy just like that, right? And I don't think that's a healthy relationship. So the way that we curate and the way that we kind of nurture our relationship and our bond with our daughters severely impacts the type of men that they pull in uh, to their creator field, the type of men that they pull in to their aura, the type of men that they essentially are attracted to. Um, I'm gonna be honest with you, like going back to my son, I've told my son straight up, I'm like, bruh, I'm going through it right now. Right? Like there are times when maybe like I'm dating, and like I feel like my heart is broken, or like I'm picking him up and he's like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Bruh, tough day." Right? And I'm telling him like, I'm really going through it right now. And I have a literal conversation with him. And the reason why this is important is because what do we do most of the times if we don't be vulnerable and tell them? What do? We like take it out on them, right? We snap on our children. And so like our patience is all of a sudden 4 inches shorter. You know what I mean? And now we're snapping, and why are we snapping? We're snapping because of the pressure that we're facing from work. We're snapping because of the pressure that we're facing financially. We're snapping because of pressures that we're facing in romantic relationships. And they don't know that. So when you're snapping at them because of what you got going on inside, they're just going to look at that like, oh, he's mean. You know what I mean? Like, oh, dad doesn't like me, or dad always is yelling at me. And, I had to learn that lesson myself. Like, my dad worked multiple jobs to provide for us. And there were moments where, as I was growing up, like, he was like low key, like mean as hell, and of course, as a child, I didn't have the recognition to be like, oh man, he just had a long day probably. Like he on his little 30-minute lunch break after working 2 jobs and now he's about to go to job 3. I think he's just like kind of in a mood right now because he just had a long day. Of course, I wasn't thinking that. And do you think he told me, like, hey, Odini, man, my bad, man. I know I kind of snapped at you, but I'm going through it right now. Of course, he didn't tell me that. You know why? Because his dad didn't tell him that. And this is a big part of what this podcast is about, also, is just showing us how to, you know, consistently make the effort to not duplicate your parents' actions because they're only duplicating their parents' actions and so forth, right? So it's like a generational curse almost. And we want to parent consciously. We want to like parent knowing exactly what we're doing and not just defaulting to how we were parented because half the times that's just actually like terrible way of doing it because everyone is giving it their best shot, right? So your dad was giving it his best shot because he didn't have the mind frame and the resources that we have today. His dad was giving it his best shot. And I think that's important, for us to realize is like people are just giving it their best shot. And what happens is as men, we tend to realize that as adults, right? As a we and what we need to do is realize that as children, because that would shape our relationships with our fathers so much better. It would shape our relationship with our mothers so much better if we were given the opportunity to just know what was really happening. And this is why this is important for us to do that. We're giving our children the opportunity to know what's really going on. So, once I realized that my son started being completely more understanding with me, He started being like really compassionate. He started being really like empathetic towards me. Once I saw that, I'm like, oh, like I'm going to tell him when something is happening because A, it's building trust, but B, like he's looking at me as someone who is human, right? I'm like humanizing the fatherhood experience, which is totally fine, right? Like it's totally okay to let your kids know that you're not perfect because they're going to raise their children not trying to be perfect. All you want to be is a good dad, right? And that's what's important. You want to give it your best shot day in and day out. So coming back to just the broader topic here, I don't want you to look at being vulnerable as a weakness. I want you to look at being vulnerable as a strength because you're overcoming a fear, and that fear is looking weak. That's another thing we're going to talk about a lot in our episodes is half the times in parenting, the decisions that we make that we look back and we're like not so proud of, it's because of our own fear. And if you can stand up to your fear, right, I would say that you are strong. So if you can stand up to your fear of looking weak, I would say that makes you strong, right? Exactly. I think there's like a bug flying. Not I think. I know there's a bug flying around in the bedroom. This would happen on the first episode, but we're here. Yeah, so and another thing about being vulnerable and why you should look at it as a superpower is, and this is key right here. As dads, we always, okay, I don't want to say always because I don't know everybody's experience, but it's in my experience that as dads, we are always wanting someone else to be vulnerable to us. You ever realize that? Like in general, when you're like giving advice, or like someone can come to you and they can say, yo, my life is in the dumps right now. Like I'm totally like fucked up. Like what can I do? And you will literally like sit there and give the world's greatest advice, won't you? And turn around and don't apply any of that to your own life, right? I'm guilty of this. Not as much today as I was before I started doing this type of work, but we're all guilty of this. Why is that? Right? Why is it that you get so you feel such pride in helping someone? You realize you wouldn't have been able to help that person if they weren't vulnerable, right? Like if you're anything like me, you get true fulfillment from helping people. Like when my friends come to me and they talk to me about the things they have going on, like it fills my cup to be the person that they're coming to, but it also fills my cup to be able to give them information that can actually change their life. Give them information that will actually make their situation better. Give them information that will actually shift their perspective. But if they weren't being vulnerable to begin with, I wouldn't have that opportunity. So, this is why you can flip it around and mirror it to your fatherhood experience, right? Like you can 1000% be vulnerable with your children because if you aren't being vulnerable with them, you don't give them that chance to like help you. And that's another thing that we got to talk about, and we'll get deeper in other episodes. But like, yo, it's okay to learn from your kids. I say this all the time. My kids are my greatest gurus. My daughter is 2 and she fits that mold too, right? Like you ever had a moment in your lifetime where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this in fatherhood. I'm gonna do this as a dad. I'm gonna show up this way as a dad. and you're really excited about it. And then like literally the next day, your kids like do something that um your kids do something that totally puts you on the spot now with that, right? You're like, okay, this is it. This is game time, right? Like I just wanted to be this way, and now my daughter done threw a little mini rant in front of these people. What I'm gonna do, right? That's just her being my greatest guru. That's her being my greatest teacher. So because it's like, okay, show me, right? And I think we gotta embrace that. We gotta embrace the fact that our children can teach us so many things. Let's give them the chance to do that. Let's give them the chance to be empathetic. Let's give, like, who else are they going to learn from? Of course, they can learn from friends and other family members, but wouldn't it feel cool? Like, how cool would it be for your kid to be empathetic to someone else? And then when someone asks them, like, yo, how did you become that way? Like, and how awesome would it be for them to be like, my dad? What? If you anything like me and you raised anything like I was raised, you would never in a million years probably say that about your own dad. Right? And that's just the reality. Um, how dope is that though? Right? For somebody to be like, man, hey, you're like super compassionate. Like, where'd you learn that from? Like, how'd you pick that up? And oh man, my dad. Come on, man. That's a game changer, man. Um, I just have to stop this episode, real quick and just interrupt and say, like, I can't believe I'm here right now with you all. Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy because, this podcast was supposed to drop a long time ago. And I just procrastinated and procrastinated. And I'm just so grateful to be doing this right now, like overcoming a fear of judgment, overcoming a fear of being seen. And, you know, it, man, like I'm just so happy that I decided to just randomly do this because, you know, if you stumbled upon this podcast, it was not by coincidence. Like, you were meant to hear something that I'm saying today. And I just think that's one of the greatest gifts in the world is giving back to each other. So it's helping someone else out. So I just had to interrupt what I was saying because I just can't believe this is happening right now. Like this is something that I low key dreamt about and it's happening. So wow, yeah. So you saw what I just did live was celebrate a win, and that's something else that we should talk about as dads, and we will, and we will for sure celebrate your wins. I'm going a little off topic right now, but celebrate your wins. When I have my coaching clients with my one-on-one calls with my coaching clients, that's the first question that I ask before anything. Hey, give me a personal win and a fatherhood win from last week. No matter how big or small it is. Celebrate your wins. So I just did that live while we're recording and it felt good. And I want you all to do the same thing, especially your wins in fatherhood. Celebrate those. Write them down, celebrate them. So yeah, I think that's all I have for today, is being vulnerable is a superpower. Being a vulnerable dad is a superpower. The young men that you are raising will benefit from it, not only in their relationship with you, but in their relationship with their friends, their future partners. Um, they're going to benefit from it. Our queens will benefit from it, not only in their relationship with you, but when they start looking at the type of man they want to attract in their life, they're going to know that they can get a guy that is not afraid to be open and expressive. and that's a healthy relationship. So they're going to know that. um and yeah, man, and also just remember to give your parents some slack. Cut them some slack, because chances are they were not able to have this type of mindset when they were coming up. And the good thing is that we can be compassionate because we now know why that was. So as adults, we can be compassionate to our dads, especially if they were not vulnerable with us. Right? Right. Man, signing off. Before I go, before I send you all light, well, I'm gonna send you all light now. So this universe is completely made up of energy and light. I think it's only like 0.1% matter. So the more light you have, the better you are. So I'm just sending you all light. No darkness. I'm just sending everyone light for the rest of the week. Whenever you're hearing this, even if you're hearing this midweek, end of the week, I'm just sending you all light and positive vibes. And just some quick updates. I have about 2 spots left in my one-on-one coaching program. The link will be in the show notes. It's 12 weeks. We meet once a week for an hour, and we do follow-up check-ins. We really, really, really get into the nitty-gritty of allowing you to look inwards, to be better outdoors, outside, as a when I say outdoors, I don't mean like outside of your door, but like look inwards to be better, out in life, as a better dad and also as a better individual, because it really starts from inside here. So if you're listening to this on audio, you didn't see me point to my chest, but you get the point. And yeah, I'm just so excited about this program. My clients so far, they're just having a great time, and I hold them accountable. We cultivate a journaling practice. We cultivate a meditation practice. We talk about triggers and how we want to cope positively. We talk about building community. Like, oh man, just a whole bunch of things that I wish that when I was uh, my first 6 7 years of parenting, I wish I was able to to lock in on. So 2 spots left for the coaching program. Go check it out, book your free call, and let's talk to see if it's a good fit. And the 365 dad journal, make sure you go check that out on my website. So super happy, super happy, super thankful to be here with you all. I'm sending you nothing but light, and just remember that um, being vulnerable is indeed a superpower. All right. Sending you light. Have a good one.